Welcome to the space between us. I'm your host, Christine Young, psychologist and founder of Weaver. This is a podcast about your social health and connections and what happens to them when you are building something that demands everything. If you are leading, founding, or building something ambitious and wondering how others stay connected to those they love and care, this is for you. Every episode, I speak with leaders and founders who share what it really cost them and what they learned along the way while building big things. Not your usual expert advice podcast, just truth. This is the space between us. Let's meet there. Welcome back to this episode. Our guest today is Dr. Nora Koslowski, co-founder and co-CEO of Even. Even is a digital career development platform for women. Nora has lived this from the inside. She moved across 4 countries for ambitious roles, being in an executive role, and have led major digital transformation at Melbourne Business School and built a business while raising 2 young girls. Her research career began exactly where her life would take her, investigating how women navigate the boundary between work and home. In this episode, we get into the real costs and gifts of building big on marriage, motherhood, and friendship. The trade-offs, the guilt, the moments of grace, and the messy work behind it all. This one is definitely honest, warm, and very real. Let's get into it.
Welcome, Dr. Noah. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm really glad that we are finally doing this. The role reverse, isn't it? Just a few years ago, I was
Almost,
a guest to Even podcast, and now you are here. And I'm very grateful for you to say yes straight away, knowing I'm starting a podcast without knowing what is this about at the beginning.
Hi, everyone. But Christine, you told me over lunch you were starting a podcast. And my first thing was like, yes, I'm in. I didn't even know what it was.
And for preparing this podcast, when I read your bio, here, what stood out for me is you started your research career investigating how people are navigating work-home boundaries. And then you went and built a life that really testing those boundaries. Moving 4 countries, 2 kids, and co-founding Even. Did you ever think about this whole journey, and when did the research actually become your reality?
It's almost like I didn't know at the time what life would look like. But if I think back to 20 years, so it's almost 20 years ago that I started my PhD on negotiating work-home boundaries. And 2 other topics that I investigated. One was the experience of women entrepreneurs and how they navigated the home-work interface. And then the second thing I also did was research around career progression for women, and specifically the question of the higher up the hierarchy you go, why are there so few women? Do they just self-select out, or what's happening? So it's almost like those 3 topics of women in entrepreneurship, work-home boundaries, career progression. It's like 20 years later, they have become my life. And I didn't know at the time, but obviously there must have been something in me that was so interested in those topics.
And is that the main driver of you co-found Even?
So I co-founded Even 2 years ago, and partly, yes, because of an understanding, but also a frustration of, how is it that 20 years later, we're still at the point where women are not progressing at the rate that they should be, when if you look at the numbers, we're more educated in terms of university degree completion. And, women have all of that potential, but it's just we still drop out and leave the workforce. And I often think it's not our problem. Like, it's not because we've done anything wrong. It's not because we're not ambitious. There's something that's happening that's just making us leave the workforce. So I was like, okay, it's time to do something about it. Ellen, my co-founder, had the same shared passion and same personal frustration. So when we co-founded Even, we were mothers to young kids. We were both in leadership careers, and just having that personal frustration of, with all of the support that we have, with the resources we have, why is this still, personally speaking, so hard? Why is it hard to juggle your personal life and your career in leadership? Why is it so hard to think about juggling women's health on top of a leadership career? And why can't we talk about these things? So that they were really some of the things that led to us founding Even. But yeah, it's been such a joy now. We've supported over 200 women in our community.
Oh, so
And
wonderful.
yeah, in less than 2 years, and we can just see when we see promotions, when we see women leading lives on their own terms, leading careers on their own terms, it's just, it's deeply satisfying.
That is so brilliant because I think I always say, even it's not just an education or research company, is way more than that. It's a village. I'm so grateful I'm part of the village. And every time when I ran expert masterclass, I love being a group of women that have career aspiration. And, I start this podcast is about relationship and ambition. So who was with you during this journey? You moved 4 countries, have 2 kids. Who were the people in your life that matters to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do love the framing that you have of the village, because in fact, with just reflecting on building even, it does feel like the village that perhaps I was craving, because it can be lonely when you do move
Oh,
countries. And so, yes, for me,
yeah.
it's been a journey of growing up in Germany, then moving to Ireland as a teenager, back to Germany again, back to Ireland again, stayed in Ireland until I was 26. So I did my PhD there and started my early career there. But then from there, I moved to England. And then eventually, after 3 years in England, I moved to Australia. And then within Australia, we've also moved into
Wow.
states. So it's been, and then I'm married to somebody who's had 5 country moves as well. Yeah. So, and I think that's probably, I'd have to say, who are the people that were with me? There's who's with you in those shared experiences, and that would be my husband. But then there's also the kind of constellation of people that you have in your head, like my parents and others that we can also talk about. But I do want to actually, yeah, I do want to start with my partner and the
Mm,
importance of, when you're moving countries, when you're taking on ambitious roles, when you're doing things like building a business. I think the choice of your partner is so critical within
mm,
that.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, it really determines to what extent you can feel freedom to make choices. It determines to what extent you can actually have that support you need to progress in your career. But yeah, I think the fact that both of us have had that shared experience of country moves,
Mm,
being the immigrant, being the person whose first language was not English,
mm,
the person who's sort of just found their own way, and it takes some time to build your community when you start somewhere anew. I think just having that for us as a just deep understanding that really helped to cement our partnership when we met each other. But then also from a careers perspective, there was one big moment that I had where we were, as a
mm,
family, we were living in
mm,
Sydney.
mm,
At that point we had one child, but I was actually pregnant with our second.
mm,
She's now 6, but at the time I was halfway through the pregnancy, and I had a job offer to move to Melbourne for a big
mm,
leadership role, which was, leading a large team of people. It was like 4 teams actually, and it was an executive role, and that was a really big decision to go, do we
mhm,
uproot our family? And also, do we do this while I'm pregnant? And what does that even mean? And what does it mean for a dual career family? And just the fact that when that opportunity came about, my first reaction was to dismiss it and to say, this is
mm.
the right time. But my partner was the one who said, let's explore it fully. And then if you do get the offer, let's figure out how we can make it work. And we did. So we've been in Melbourne for 5 years. I took that role, which was eventually Chief Innovation Officer at Melbourne Business School.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's really those moments where you kind of think, yeah, the importance of a partnership really stands out to me.
We should say thank you to your husband to bring you from Sydney to Melbourne and also support your ambitions. And speaking of that, what would you think the major qualities that you need to look for in a partner? If someone still at this stage is looking and have very ambitious career, and because I work with many younger women and they are so brilliant, but they are going through a pattern of meeting the wrong person and they have to sacrifice their career and they didn't even know that they are sacrificing their career.
Wow.
Talk about your partner, how supportive he is. What qualities did he show up during those critical moments that allow you to really explore that opportunity that you mentioned?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's a big one. And I have to say, I had to get it wrong before I got it right. And when I was in my first big leadership role, I was an academic head of department. So it was a big leadership role, large team, large budget responsibility. And at the time, I had a partner who actually said, I don't want you to take the role because it meant moving. And he said, it's going to take you away from me. And I don't want that. You know, it's like everyone has their own preferences of how they want a partnership to be. And for some, it means staying close to your original family. It means kind of having that consistent group of friends over many decades. For me, it's more about evaluating opportunities for discomfort and for growth. And I wanted that. But just that experience of we're so misaligned, that taught me what I did want, which was somebody who would understand my ambition, support it, and in fact encourage it. Because I think as women especially, there's just already so many forces that diminish our ambition and tell us to, you know, to want less or to ask for less. And I wanted somebody who would actually encourage me to wish for more. And so when my husband and I met very early on in our relationship, and he said, like, how far do you want to go in life?
Wow, great question.
And I was like, well, all the way. Like, let's push it as far as we can. And he was like, great. Okay, good to know. But I needed to, like, he said he needed to know that as we met to kind of go, what kind of a life would we have? Yeah. And what to prepare for. And we've both had these really ambitious careers where it's not perfect. And the juggle with that is super complex. But we're both understanding of the fact that it's a need that we both have.
I think that's value alignment, isn't it? You value about the fullness of life, and he shared this very similar value and is compatible.
And I think then, you know, to come back to the question about if you've got women in your community who are at an earlier life stage, like I'm not a big fan of making lists for your partner because there's no perfection ever. And like every partnership and marriage has its imperfections. But I think it's that, what you said, it's that values alignment and really understanding, is this somebody who's going to support me, who sees what I want, who honors what I want, versus somebody who's trying to put me in a specific box that I hadn't actually chosen for myself. I think that's sort of how I would think about that choice. And we've had, in the Even community, we've had many CEOs actually talk about that choice of life partner as being one of the most important career decisions that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about knowing what you want, where do you want to go? And it sounds like you have been through a deep work and self-development journey. What resources that have helped you to realize what you want and who you are, what's your values?
Yeah, I do think it's worth examining your life, and it's worth living a sort of reflective life rather than just going along with what you think the obvious next step is. For me, it's been a combination of different things that have helped, whether it's formal development, whether it's great conversations or fantastic role models and relationships. So just from the formal development side of things, I've been really lucky as leader. I've had some great opportunities early on to attend different leadership development programs, or I've had executive coaching quite a few times. And I think just that deliberate time, that practice of learning about what are some of the tools that are going to help you. Like one of the most basic things I remember as an early leader in my late 20s was somebody saying, do you know what your values are? At the time, I was like, no idea. But this is so enlightening. This helps me to understand like why I'm making some of these decisions. So just somebody kind of sitting with me and working through something like identifying your values is really important. And then, yeah, like I said, other people, having great role models, having people who ask you those deeper questions, like my husband with that great question of how far do you want to go in life? That was really enlightening, but also other leaders. In my first leadership role, I had a fantastic boss who I reported to, a woman who was a few years ahead of me in career. So she had young kids at the time when I was not yet a mother, and who really helped me by sharing her own thinking, her own decision making, her own juggle. And that really helped me to think about, again, what did I want? What did I not want? And so I think you really need to have that support needs to be through multiple lenses. And I know like you actually, like your own content, got great reflection exercises for people. I definitely encourage them to check out what you're doing with Weaver, because I think that's whenever you do come and speak to our community, it's always like, oh, I hadn't realized this about myself. And yeah, Christine's helping us to see a few things differently.
Thank you. And this question I'm going to ask all guests. What has building all these cost to your relationship? And then we'll talk about gift. Let's
Yeah.
talk about what cost your relationship.
Said earlier, no partnership
Mm.
is perfect. And I think there are trade-offs that you make in a partnership, even when you're aligned on supporting each other's success. There's realities of, for example, for me to be able to take that ambitious role in Melbourne, it meant my husband has now been commuting to work from Melbourne to Sydney for the past 5 years. So that is a cost, not just a monetary cost, but it's also tiring to have to fly up. And then it means that when he's not here, I'm obviously juggling running a business with being the only caregiver. So there's definitely a cost from that perspective. And the fact that he continues to support that now that we're building even, he continues to make that sacrifice for my business ambition. There's definite costs like that. It's also with the kids. We haven't really talked about the kids very much. But
Yeah.
I would like to think I'm a present parent. So we have 50-50 responsibility when it comes to drop-offs, when it comes to like kids' appointments and things like that. But there are, any working parents will know this. There are so many extras that are asked of you as a parent that I can't do. So, and that is a cost that the kids talk to me about that. So, for example, why are you never the mum who volunteers for reading at school?
Did they
There's
ask you that?
all
And
the
how
time.
did you feel?
And there's so many things that there's always volunteer parents required for like gardening, for cooking activities, for all sorts of things at school that I often just cannot do. This happens at like 2 p.m. on a weekday, and that's not possible when you're really running at full speed in business. So yeah, so we talk about it, and I think there's a slight disappointment perhaps in the kids, but also a growing understanding as they grow older. And I do hope, especially when they're teenagers and beyond, that they understand those trade-offs in their own context and in their own choices that they make when they embark on their careers.
And I think you have 2 girls,
Yeah.
do you? And there is another research paper, probably you've heard of it, is showing women who has daughters and the daughters who grow up with working mom, they grew up with that sense of independence and knowing their self-worth more.
Yeah. I didn't read that paper, but I did find another one which said that it compared boys and girls' experiences of early exposure to entrepreneurship, not just through parents, but through like neighbors, community, friends, parents. And it was much more important for girls actually to have that exposure, and it impacted their eventual likelihood to become entrepreneurs themselves much more strongly than it did for boys. So I do think there are gifts, that early exposure to like, this is what a career looks like. This is what a business looks like. I think there's a lot of gifts, and I got a lot of early exposure. My dad was a CEO, so that I do saw that as a gift, but also I saw a lack of presence, but I could see both when I became a bit older.
And how did you manage the tension of, I need to run my career and I want to be there and I want to be there for kids?
It's always there. Like
Always
even
there.
this morning, so my husband was on drop-off duty this morning while I made time for my self-care, which is I had a workout at the gym. So I didn't even see my girls this morning. And the guilt was like, it's always there. Oh, I'm missing the morning. But at the same time, like I'm finishing work at 3 today to pick them up, spend the afternoon with them. When the guilt's there, I have to just go, okay, let's get real. And what's the beautiful thing, what's the experience where they're going to see me be fully present today? What's the experience where they see me, like my full attention's going to be there? And that probably matters more than 10 rushed minutes where we're all trying to multitask and get out of the house.
Love that mindset shift in the moment. Does that always happen where you always be able to shift it? Because I want the listeners to know, I know all of us are not perfect. Sometimes we manage it gracefully, like what you did this morning. So what happened? You couldn't do that.
Yeah, I think I do try to shift that mindset and focus on exactly just what's most important rather than just because you could be constantly sitting there with that guilt always being present, and it's not especially helpful. And often the guilt that you're feeling has nothing to do with how they're feeling in a particular moment. So for all I know, they probably had a great time this morning just spending an hour with their dad, and that was special time with him. But so the reality of what they're experiencing is not my reality, and yeah, I do try to get myself
That's
out of
good.
that. But I think for anyone who's listening, it's there. It's always there. We can try to pretend that mothering guilt is not a thing, but it's just there. And I think it's more, okay, what are we going to do with it? What are some of the productive things how do we reframe it? How do we work through it? And then how do we share it? Like, I can share another moment with you that I've recently been reflecting on. So like a big career moment that I had was a couple of years ago. I interviewed Sam Altman in front of 2,500 people on
Mm,
stage. And it
mm,
looked so glamorous on the pictures. It was like this beautiful moment. But what people didn't know, and I've never actually shared this story publicly, so it's the first for your podcast. What people didn't know is, that's like a career highlight. And in the backstage, half an hour before going on stage, we had a phone call from school like, hey, your daughter's just thrown up. And you need to come pick her up.
How old was she back then?
She was 5 at the time. So it was her first year of school. She was 5. So yeah, she's thrown up. I was like, I don't even know, like, I can't deal with this right now. So my husband was also backstage with me because it was a big career moment. So we were both
mm,
like, no family in the country. What do we do? And that was one where you just go, okay, like realistically, I actually cannot take on that
mm,
guilt and that caring right now. And so you just go,
mm,
let's share it. So my husband then, he took the phone. He's like, just give it to me.
mm,
And he organized for our babysitter to like rush to the school to get our car because she didn't have
mm.
baby cars or child car seats. She couldn't operate one of our cars. Like another parent from kinder had to help. Like it's all of this stuff that just kind of muddles in the background, but you don't see that. So whenever you see really successful professionals, I think what I want you to see is like what are the 100 different things that are going on in the background for them to have made it to that stage today. And often it's messy and it's real and somebody's going to throw up. And that's just like, that's the reality of being a working parent.
And absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that moment. And now when you reflect it back, it's such a critical moment and in your career and in life. And, sometimes I hope you also remember when dealing with everyday work stress, always remember that moment and gives you some strength that you can take back from that moment. You have gone through it and you have done it once and you can do it many, many more times. And
Yeah,
I don't hope that you have many, many more times of those challenging moments, but the strength you already had is always with you. And I think that's something we don't see. We don't podcast this
we don't
kind of,
usually.
we only see you, how brilliant you are on stage.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
it.
and this is another thing that no leadership training program will actually teach you. There's none out there talk about, how do you actually select a life partner and navigate the motherhood guilt when you want to have this ambitious career building big things.
That's right. Yeah, we don't talk about it enough. And I think we need to actually, especially if we consider what's it going to take to get more women into those big,
Mm,
powerful roles. We need to actually share the reality because I think often you see a polished version of a woman who's an executive. And I think it can be hard to relate to. And so I think the more we can actually share some of those messy experiences, the more we can demystify what goes on behind the scenes. I think the more achievable and realistic we can actually make it for women to be in those roles.
yeah, absolutely. I'm so interested in your social ecosystem. Who, apart from your husband, your two girls, who are with you
Mm,
in your ecosystem, and how do you build those people? How do you find those people?
yeah. So I there's two parts that are really important. One is my family of origin, but then also here who's building with me. And I very much do see this as a great privilege. I have this group of other ambitious women that get what I'm going through. So
Mm,
they are also highly educated. They are either in ambitious roles or they're building a business, but many of them are also navigating the messiness of motherhood. They're navigating the messiness of like perimenopause. And I love the fact that there's like about 5 women that I really hold very dear. And we can just text each other to go like, this just happened. And like a messy perimenopause moment, or this just happened, like a messy childcare moment. At the same time, we can also text each other and go, hey, I've got this question about money and finances in a business. Like, can we chat? And it's like, yeah, of course we can. And that degree of openness, I think, and feeling that there's others who are in your corner has been so important to me.
Yeah. And how do you create or cultivate that group? Are they your personal friends, or you meet them professionally and become very nourishing, meaningful professional women group? How did that happen?
It's a mix. I think most of them have come somehow through my professional life. So they're in a similar space where they might have a PhD in like org psych or an area like that, or they might be in the broad world of like leadership and people. So there's a shared understanding of the kind of career that I have. But then others have come actually through, like one of them's like my previous neighbor, right? So it's people where you just go, okay, I'm just going to make the effort. And often I am somebody who does, like, I do make the effort. It's hard. And it might be, sometimes the effort might be sending a text. I know that you have this beautiful practice if you have this friend who's really busy, right? That you just call, you have this phone habit. I've got some friends like that where, okay, some weeks it might just be a text, but you need to put in the effort to nurture those relationships. And other weeks it might be that like it's a phone call. But I think unless you actually are intentional about cultivating those relationships, it's just so easy for it to drop off your priority list because, yeah, if you're a founder, if you're an executive, it can be so easy to just invest all of your identity and all of your time in your professional career. But I think especially what I've learned through those transition moments where I've moved from like being an academic to being a consultant or being executive to being a founder, from those transition moments, you actually realize how little your professional title actually really matters. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to give you nourishment. It's not going to be there when you've had a really tough day.
Tough.
Yeah.
And what would you say the core characteristics of a great friendship? How do you know
Yeah.
a friendship is nourishing to you?
I always know when somebody's actually a friend is when I can tell them the not so glamorous stuff. And same, and it's mutual. They also kind of go, I'm having this moment of doubt, or I'm like so overwhelmed right now, I don't know what to do. Or I'm having a tough time in my partnership. Like that's when I think when you're real with each other, that for me is like, okay, this is a friend. So that's sort of my signal.
And do you think to maintain the friendship that you had or marriage, what are the most important skills that you think you need to learn to do that?
I love that because I feel like I just said, we forget about how important those friendships are as we become more busy. And I definitely wouldn't say I'm perfect at this, but I think we all need to relearn how do you actually make friends when we're in our 30s and 40s. Which I guess is also the point that we like friendships. It doesn't have to. You don't have to. They don't have to stay constant, and they don't have to
No.
stay and feel the same forever. And I think there's different
Yeah.
phases and needs. But I do think, yeah, just coming back to the skills piece, I think it's like one of the key things we need to relearn is that skill of initiation. And we can't sort of wait to be asked to do things. I think we have to actually go, all right, this is awkward. I'm in my 30s and 40s, but I'm going to ask somebody that I think I have an inkling I might want to be friends with them. I'm going to ask them to have coffee, or
Yeah.
like I'm going to ask, like, do you want to go for a walk? And I think you have to make the first move if you actually want to feel nourished and supported and surrounded. And it's awkward sometimes, but what I've been learning is like sometimes people don't reciprocate. So we have that fallacy of, okay, if I make the first move, then they're going to have to be the one to book the next coffee or the next dinner. And it's like, you know what? Like sometimes some people are just not that good at initiating, but they would be so happy for you to ask again. You're not losing anything by asking a second or a third time. So I think it's kind of getting over that fear of asking. And I keep asking.
It's amazing. Like what you said, I think that's exactly what we need in this world because we can be so busy. Everyone start, how are you? I'm busy. That's pretty much the line. That's how we start a conversation. And it's really about how much we intentionally and slow down. And I always think that this world is actually not designed for high quality connection. Even this stranger has huge potential to be my life buddy because of how everything is optimized for output, for the quickness. Beautiful relationship do not just happen like this. That's what weaver the name is for, actually. You have to slowly weave a beautiful relationship. People may not like to hear it. A healthy relationship is slow process. You have to know yourself, know your value. There is no quick fix to this.
Yeah.
And you initiate, you mentioned it's such a strong skill because when you initiate, you put yourself out there. You put yourself in the opportunity of being rejected. And how about marriage? Is that the similar skills or you think it's a completely different set of skills?
Good question. I don't know. I think there's also a degree of like proactivity and nurturing required. So I think that term weaver and weaving is same thing. It's really appropriate, I think, for the work of marriage as well, because it does require relational work to sort of, not just function and live alongside each other, but to actually kind of look at each other and go, like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Can we be intentional about a conversation or about time spent together? And that's a lot of work. I mean, that's more work than a friendship. And yet I think because we're so in such proximity to each other, I think it's easy to neglect the intentional work of
Absolutely.
maintaining that quality conversation and quality relationship.
Yeah, I talk about it in one of Eva masterclass was one of the key moment is when your partner come home.
Oh,
Meet
I
your
love that.
meet your partner as if it's completely new, refreshed, and excited. This is ideal, but it's like you may have a really bad day, and then you want to launch your venting or complaint or whatever. But it's almost this split second of taking it back.
Yeah.
How are you? Welcome home. How's the day?
I honestly, I love that sort of I don't know what you called it, whether it's a reset or a greet ritual, but I actually love that so much. And I think I do try to do that when the opportunity is there. And same with the kids as well. It's a moment of transition to go, like, I'm happy to see you. I want to fully look at you and I want to be attentive and present. I think that's really important, but it's not 100%, definitely not in our house.
And, I think kids are so sensitive to the point, you probably know this better than me. If they enter a room and the parents is on the phone, that moment they felt like, I'm not welcome here. It's almost like when they come into the room, you have to like join them with excitement. Yeah, and they are them being seen and being heard.
I think it's like if you prioritize those moments where it's really important, then it's actually doable. So if it's that moment of where you greet your kids, or I find when I'm doing pickup at school, I try to actually, like, that moment where I wait for the bell to ring, like, I don't look at my phone because I'm like, I'm transitioning right now to the moment of being present and being your parent. And so I'm like waiting for 5 minutes and I'm just sort of grounding myself in the fact that this is going to be a different vibe. And then I'm going to fully greet you. I think those really high quality moments, that's a way for me to think about the juggle in a way that makes me feel better about some of the mothering guilt that we talked about earlier, is living for those moments of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. If there is a magic wand, what would be the one skill you think that you want to teach your kids or the school should teach your kids for the better humanity? What is the one skill you think that we are so missing in this world?
Wow. I think, my thinking on that one has probably changed. So when I remember being pregnant and going, okay, I just really want for my kids to be kind, to be in a world that's kind. But now raising 2 girls who are in primary school, I really just, honestly, I want for them to feel like they can be confident and they can go about the world and ask for what they want. I think just from the perspective of, what's it going to take for us to get to even or to get to a version of equality, that's really what I wish that they would develop, is full authentic confidence in, like, they're loved, they're worthy, they're valued. Yeah.
And what do you think the world need to shift in order to support that authenticity? Part of the work is you provide a very secured and loving home life for them to express themselves, to be confident, do whatever you love and we will be here. It's completely safe and secure. And they go out the world. And what do you think the world needs to shift for them to be who they are and thrive in that and ask for what they want?
Yeah. Well, I think there's the acceptance part, right? Which is so the mirror needs to be that world also, when they share who they are, when they show themselves as they are, is that world going to mirror this, and is it going to embrace and accept us being that authentic version of ourselves? And I do see, actually, I think when I compare the school environment that I'm now seeing as a parent. I think it's certainly set up to be much more that than when I was a child. There's a lot of emphasis on acceptance, on difference. There's a lot of emphasis on teaching kids social skills that we were never taught, on embracing and valuing and rewarding kindness actually as a skill.
Yeah.
So I do see that that world is being built, but maybe more so in schools than I see it in workplaces.
And before we finish the podcast, is there anything we didn't touch on that feels important for you to share?
No, I mean, some of it we covered, but I think the messiness of it and the imperfection, and I think I love the weaving aspect, but the work, like relationships, and whether it's a partnership or a marriage or whether it's raising children, it's work, and it's not perfect. And there's no, like, I wouldn't want for people to listen and go, okay, these are people I need to emulate and they've got it all together. I think part of the conversation that you're leading is actually like, no, it's slow, it's daily effort, and you're going to have a setback. And, then you might have some progress. But I think that's my thinking about relationships as they grow and as they evolve over time, is just, that you're engaging in work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what you said is so true about the messiness and chaos behind all these achievements. Is so much work behind it. And also it takes so much courage. How much work behind the scene is always almost in proportion of a lot of leaders that I adore and respect. So much hard work behind the scene. And we don't have moments to talk about those things, particularly the sacrifice that they made. And I think I share this with you as well. I made a sacrifice. Weaver is not raising capital. And, the moment of me choosing that with my fertility journey is like, I'm not even there yet, but I had the moment of so much internal struggle around how much I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
And how long I'm going to
Yeah.
pause. So I'm sure a lot of women have also gone through that and the deep work that has been doing behind the scene. Today, thank you so much for being here. All of us who are listening will benefit what you have shared. We want people knowing this is not easy, but when you put yourself out there doing the work, nurturing your relationships, the result is all worth it. Thank you so much, Nora.
Thank you for having me, Christine.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If this conversation resonates with you, I'd love you to share it with someone who is navigating the same tension, someone who is building something big and wondering how to stay close to the people they love and care. All the links and resources we talked about are in the show notes. New episode drops every 2 weeks. And if you want to stay connected between episodes, follow me on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. I share stories, insights, and reflections on social health and relationships to help you build stronger connections. Until next time, I'll see you in the space between us.